Hey guys, Jack here, and today we've got our first proper look at the Battlefield 1 single player campaign. A fully fledged campaign trailer was just released, 2 minutes long, and it introduces us to some of the characters and locations we'll encounter during the game. It shows us some cinematic cutscenes as well as gameplay. If you haven't seen the trailer already, I'd recommend you go and watch it now. I'll link it in the description below because it'll only be on in the background of my video here, cut up into sections, and of course no sound. As I talk about it, I think it's really looking very impressive so far, and reactions I've seen on social media have been mostly positive. If you've watched it, let me know what you think down in the comments below. In terms of the tone, what do you think DICE are going for here? For me personally, I'm excited that we're seeing a World War I game here that appears to be respecting the history of the Great War, and it'll be the first time really in a AAA FPS that you'll get to experience a popcorn video game version of the Great War like this. There are some brutal takedowns in there, sacrifices, Lawrence of Arabia maybe, and a reflective moment at the end whilst a German and British soldier stare each other down, rifles pointed at each other, surrounded by piles of bodies. And also Preston from Fallout 4. We found out that the single player campaign will be titled War Stories, focusing on different protagonists with unique backgrounds and skills. And while our characters are at war, the stories in Battlefield 1 are personal. They're about people rather than history or battles. DICE are hopefully going for a heavily character-driven experience here, because most of their campaigns in the past, especially BF3 and BF4, had really throwaway characters in my opinion, fighting fictional wars that you didn't really care about that much. Maybe with this being based off World War I, that will change in BF1 and offer a compelling and exciting personal experience. And the global scale of the war apparently made DICE reconsider the format of what they would offer in the Battlefield 1 single player. One character hopping through those different settings and scenarios wouldn't really be as immersive or totally respectful to the setting, so they decided on an anthology format, a set of characters with their own more focused stories. That way we can have immersion and variety, which is classed as a double win, it reads in the news post. So it seems like that we're going to be getting character POV hopping, but only though through maybe 4 or 5 different characters, and you'll spend a couple of hours I guess focused on their little bubble of the war and get to know them and what they experienced. One example that they talk about is the war story, which is called Through Mud and Blood, and this takes place late in the war and centres on a British Mark V tank crew. The story focuses on a young soldier assigned to the crew as the tank's driver. However, our protagonist has no experience of these modern war vehicles and needs to quickly learn and learn fast. Our hero is also struggling with earning the trust of his fellow crew members, so there's a social dynamic there in the story too. And this sounds a bit like the movie Fury to me if you've seen it, making the whole thing somewhat personal. Danny Edwards, I'm guessing that's the guy you play as, is our driver character. He's not an ace sniper, he's not a crack pilot, he's not a demo expert, he's in fact a former chauffeur, a volunteer new to the war. He can drive and he can fix things, and that's where we start in this mission by the looks of it, a rookie thrown into the chaos. So in previous Battlefield games we've experienced the story through the eyes of one main character, and it was very rare that the camera really cuts anywhere, but in BF1 DICE decided that they wanted stronger characters instead of just telling the players, you are this character. One way to do this was to invoke classic cinematics that lets you see your character more than in first person theatre. DICE wanted the player to see and feel what the characters are going through rather than just experiencing it from behind their eyes, and that's really paid off, they're saying, not just in storytelling ability but also in emotional engagement. And as we've seen from the trailer there, it looks like we're going to get plenty of those cinematics during the course of the campaign, and I suppose with those you really can do a lot more than just sticking in a first person perspective. On top of this, DICE say that they're going for a multiplayer feel in the single player, something that they attempted with BF4 but didn't really pull off very well. Playing Battlefield games you usually have an objective, a loadout and a plan. This plan often comes apart as you're realising it, and then you've got to improvise to make do based on the enemies and vehicles that you might be facing off against. As such, it seems that many of the levels in the BF1 campaign will embrace a systemic gameplay style, flowing more naturally maybe, giving the players more choice and openness and the freedom that makes the Battlefield the high agency game that we know it is. And they provide a specific example of this systemic gameplay too. This isn't really a spoiler in my eyes, so don't worry about it. But during the Through Mud and Blood mission that we just talked about there's a section in it called the Fog of War. And here you'll suddenly find yourself in a misty forest. Due to the low visibility, you're actually moving ahead of your tank on foot and clearing camps of enemies, and if you like, you can use explosives to blow up the enemy's anti-tank weapons, so when you take the tank through you're going to be okay, or you can sneak up and do melee attacks, and I'm guessing that's the stealth section and takedowns that we heard about in the ESRB ratings. Eventually, through that level, you'll come across a relatively large base filled with field guns, so again, you can either destroy them to protect your tank or use them against the enemies. You'll also have the option of taking out an enemy tank crew, which suddenly gives you access to an enemy vehicle that you can then seize for the encounter. And this is all designed to encourage players to play in their way, just like in multiplayer, I guess. And I think what they're talking about here is maybe optional objectives or side missions, or maybe just ways of making the mission different or easier for yourself. And finally for today, more specifics about exactly who these characters are. We'll get to see real life historical figures whilst playing through the single player. A romantic and somewhat controversial character, Lawrence of Arabia, is a name many people recognise, so hashtag confirmed it is him. Right up there with the Red Baron, and he of course is the crack German fighter pilot. Lawrence is one of the most iconic World War I names, and we'll get to spend some time with him. And his story is going to revolve around facing off with a technically superior army. Lawrence is put in a true underdog situation in BF1. The Ottoman Empire has a giant armoured train called the Canavar, or Beast in Turkish, equipped with a huge artillery piece that can strike from miles away. The Empire's devastating artillery engages rebel forces who are wielding rifles from horseback. So that's the situation where you've got old meets new, horses with cavalrymen and women carrying swords and bolt-action rifles versus tanks and armoured trains. And in this section of the game, you'll be playing as an Arab rebel that's depicted as Lawrence's right hand. This is probably the recurring female character that we've seen a lot in the trailers. This character needs to use her resourceful playstyle to scout out enemy encampments, liberate the equipment needed, and draw the armoured train out into a final confrontation. Play it loud, quiet, long range, close up, on your horse, or in an appropriate vehicle. It's up to you. And that right there sounds exactly like a Far Cry mission to me, and we saw glimpses of EA mimicking that formula in the Hardline campaign, if you remember. But here it sounds like it's going to be on a much larger scale. So that's all we've got for now. I doubt there'll be another fully fledged single player trailer before the game is released, but definitely some kind of launch trailer which mashes up single player and multiplayer footage. That's normally the way that DICE do things for Battlefield games. We shall see. So once again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What did you think of the trailer? Like it, love it, hate it? If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down, and I'll see you in the next one.